One of the things that I normally hear is sort of, well, I'm not good enough, I don't belong, I shouldn't take that possibility because I'm not capable or I'm not qualified enough. I shouldn't go and facilitate that workshop because they're too good for me. That's on the self-image that you where you put yourself down compared to who you actually are and what is possible for you. That's an inauthenticity in itself, because what I realize, at least when I hear people in that conversation, is they're not really grounding that. And you ask them sort of, well, how do you know? They've come up with a version of a story that has fed into that thought, that perception that they have of themselves, but they can't necessarily see if it's true or not.
Hello, everyone. Another episode with Lucy Faulconer. Lucy, we're discussing different topics that you bring up after having conversations with people in our community and beyond, when they work with organizations, leaders, and other people. So we briefly had a conversation what the topic for today's episode is going to be, but let me ask you to bring it up and create the case, create the conversation in the beginning, and then we can take it from there. Yeah.
Yeah, great to be here with you again today. And the topic is self-image. And the reason I've brought this topic today is because not only do I hear it in the conversations that I might have with my clients, but I think it's one of the biggest topics that our coaches in our community also coach around. That is, how do we support people to understand the relationship they have with the self-image, the conversations they have with themselves, and how does that relate to this framework. So I want to take this opportunity to unpack that a little bit with you and have some tangible examples of it.
Yeah. So how about we start creating some clarification around the word self first? Yeah, because as much as it seems to be quite a simple of a concept, sometimes I don't think that we need to assume that when we use that term, when we use that word, we mean the same thing. If we look into the dictionary, yeah, so the word self would be something like the essential characteristics that distinguishes a person from others. Yeah, so what's sort of unique about you? Because we as human beings, we share so many different qualities, but we relate to those qualities slightly differently, yeah, and the combination of that is going to make us different, at least to some degree, yeah. Now there are various different views around that. For example, you can take kind of a more mystic view on self, where it is being said that like there's no self and you need to put yourself and ego aside and you need to emerge and you need to merge yourself into the universe, whatever that's supposed to mean. And there are other perspectives that are quite individualistic and they put lots of emphasis on self, yeah,
Yeah.
and individuality. So here, I mean, when we're talking about self, self is a combination of different things. I think the first bit is when we are thrown into this world, when we are born, we do have an innate self. It's observable. Now there are so many different descriptions of that, but we can clearly see that um, babies are different right from the get-go. Yeah, so they express themselves quite differently. And so let's call it that distinct being, that unique being that it starts its existence right from the get-go. Now, does this suggest that there is this fixated being there? Well, like we cannot. This is a kind of a irrational matter. We cannot fully say that yes or fully say no. Even if you want to look into it scientifically, while lots of people would love to think that the babies are blank slates and you can write whatever you want on it, but we know through genetics that when a baby is born, the baby is a mosaic of their whole ancestry. So the baby comes with so many different characteristics already. Now, so let's acknowledge that there is this innate being. Let's call it unique being. Let's acknowledge that it's not necessarily fixated, or even if it is, it doesn't matter much because at the end of the day, as we grow, we constantly are evolving. Our understanding of that self or unique being is constantly evolving. Yeah, so therefore that's there. And then there comes other things, as we grow up through our self-thought, interactions with the environment, interactions with others, the feedback that we receive, the stories that we hear. We see ourselves in the mirrors of these external um, beings and external forces. And gradually, this sense of self is being developed further and further. And then you construct this image of yourself, which we basically talk about it. We refer to it as self image.
Yeah, so good that to start there because even as I was listening, one of the biggest things that I noticed is that sense of self. At some point in our lives, a lot of people start losing it. So
Mm,
when I talk about self-image with people, a lot of it is based in how they're comparing themselves to others. So that sense of
mm,
their uniqueness, their self, is sort of put in the back burner, and the way they relate to themselves. So if we say self-image, what it is from the being framework is those conversations you have with yourself about yourself. And
yes.
a lot of the time they are more around, well, how do I compare to those other people outside, the people that I are surrounding me or that I want to model, and what does that tell me about me? And it's not
Mm.
necessarily starting from that viewpoint of, well, who am I, what is my unique being, what is my myself, and then how do I express that to the world? And I'm interested to hear there
Mm.
for you, like, what do you think is the cost or the impact of that?
See, a part of that not embracing who we are, it has its root in so many norms that we've constructed in the society. See, from the get-go, you're being told to be this way or that way, or behave, or be a nice girl, be a nice boy, or whatever. Basically, we're being told through the educational system, through the upbringing, and let's say, for example, like if you're living in a kind of culture which is more socialistic, like it's influenced by socialism, let's say, the emphasis is going to be more on the group, um, or the society at large, rather than on individual. Now, if you grow up in a kind of an environment which is more liberal, in a traditional sense, then there's more emphasis on individuality. Now, I'm not arguing that this one is better than the others. This is basically quite descriptive. Yeah, I'm saying that the environment is going to have a massive impact, and the culture, obviously. Now, we see that, let's say, for example, when we talk about ego, yeah, there's lots of conversations where, oh, you need to put your ego aside, or ego is the enemy. Yeah. While, yes, so there is this kind of a thin line where, with regards to self importance, let's say, you don't want to take yourself too seriously. At the same time, you don't want to not take yourself seriously at all. In the being book, in the framework, I talk about this concept in the very beginning of the book. um, I call it the paradox of importance. Now, see, the thing is, this question, of philosophical question, that do you matter or not? It's like, are you just yet another human being, one of the crowd who is being thrown into this world, and you live for a short period of time in the eyes of history, and then you're going to be taken away like um, a dust. Yeah, the dust is going to be blown away. Or you actually matter, and you have significance in what you do, what you say, your contribution, your legacy, the footprint that you're going to leave and then go. And my conversation is like there's a balance there, and of course I think that we matter. um, Even a leaf falling from a tree matters, has an impact in the whole ecosystem, so why not us? So
Mm.
the idea is like you need to be able to balance that out, so that we don't fall from either of the sides of this thin rope. Because like, see, if the conversations you have about yourself with yourself, your self image is quite bloated, it's quite exaggerated. You see yourself being way more significant than that you are as a human being. That leads to certain type of inauthenticity. At the same time, if you're not taking yourself seriously at all, and basically your self-image is far lower than what and who you actually are, that's another type of inauthenticity. So inauthenticity is not only exaggeration, you know what I mean? So, so therefore, it's the balance or the congruence or the authenticity, as we call it, of these conversation one has with themselves.
So let's make this more tangible, because I
So,
think you've just said this is an inauthenticity. So
mhm,
one of the biggest difference that I think this concept of self-image and in the context of authenticity makes when we're working with someone, it can be the coaches that we work with or the individuals that we coach and or that we work with. It's being able to understand that the conversations we have with ourselves, um, what they're grounded on. So let me share a few examples. One of the things that I normally hear is sort of, well, I'm not good enough. I don't belong. I shouldn't take that possibility
mm,
because I'm not capable, or I'm not qualified enough. I shouldn't go and
mm,
facilitate that workshop because they're too good for me. So that's on the
mm,
self image that where you put yourself down compared to who you actually
mm,
are and what is possible for you. So that's an
mhm,
inauthenticity in itself, because what I realize, at least when I hear people in that conversation, is they're not really grounding that. And you ask them sort of, well, how do you know? How do you know that you're not good
mm,
enough? How do you know that you're not meant to facilitate, for example, for that group, because that group is too good for you?
yeah,
And when you ask those
mhm, mhm,
questions, they've come up with a version of a story that has fed into that thought, that
mm.
perception that they have of themselves, but they can't necessarily see if it's true or not. It's mainly here with them.
See, like that's a good one, because when you say, let's say, if you're saying I'm not good enough, I mean, and then you said that you assume that that's inauthenticity, yeah. But the thing is, sometimes maybe you're not good enough, and maybe you have a congruent or authentic view of yourself. But the good news is, most of the time, in most cases, most of us are not enough. What does supposed to mean when you say you're enough? Yeah, like I'm not enough when I'm an amateur, when I'm a beginner, and I'm starting a new hobby. I'm starting a new activity. Yeah. So let's imagine that you're going to start, I don't know, putting some aquariums together. Yeah. And you don't know much about fish. You don't know much about like the ecosystem that you need to create, what nitrite is, what's the role of certain bacteria, how the current of the water is going to impact certain different types of fish. Depends on the type of fish, like the hardness of the water matters, the pH of
Mhm.
the water matters. et cetera, et cetera. There's so much nuances in that. So, are you enough? You're not. But the good news is we're not fixated. We can transform. You can keep developing your conceptions of different parts of reality to the point that like due to that awareness and practice and going through this iterative approach of execution, tracking, l- learning, refining, and executing again, you're going to become more and more and more effective, which is basically an essentially is what is being discussed in the transformation methodology of the being framework. So therefore you may not be enough, and that's okay. The thing is, you're going to put yourself in situations that are going to stretch you to a degree. Yeah. And every time you stretch yourself a little bit more, then you're creating an opportunity for yourself for growth. Now, at the same time, then see, if you don't have a very congruent understanding of yourself, then you may all of a sudden jump into, skip many levels. For example, if just today you started practicing martial arts, you're doing boxing for, like, let's say, 2 months, and then you're going to go and jump into the ring. Um, you know,
Probably
um,
not.
mm, fighting Mike Tyson of the word, you're going to be regretted. So the thing is, yeah, so there is this level of understanding we want to develop of where we are at the moment. And that's really hard to measure, really, yeah. And you're going to do your best to, zoom out, look into the experts in the field, compare yourself, see where you're standing, and then if you think that you need more work, very likely you may need more work, yeah, and you're going to give it what it takes. And that's exactly what those people that they gain mastery in whatever field it is, they have done at some point, because no one is being born having mastery in any field. You know what I mean? So what I'm trying to say here is it's extremely important for us to set our expectations right. If you imagine that you should be already good at something without, like, giving it what it takes, I think it's authentic to think that you're not good enough yet.
Yeah, well, that's the key because I think there's two things that you've said that are really important is that our self image is when we
Mhm.
see ourselves as not enough or that we're not prepared enough, for example, to take an opportunity. Well, fair enough. You might not be.
Yeah.
But then it's what is
Hmm.
the gap? And sometimes we think the gap is way too big and that it's not possible for us to ever achieve to get to that level where we are
Hmm.
prepared for those opportunities. And that's having a very fixated
Yeah.
way of looking at ourselves versus saying, okay, if this is
Yeah.
where I want to get, I don't feel prepared for it yet, is then what can I do to authentically grow myself and learn, develop myself so I can get to that stage. And I have a
Yeah.
really clear example of this. I remember that one of the first meetings I had here when I came to Australia and I was setting myself as a coach, I knew I could do the coaching. I knew I could do the facilitating.
Mm.
But I went and spoke to an HR director of a company. What I'd never done on
Mhm.
my own before was sell a big project. So I knew I
Mhm.
could do the coaching, I could do the facilitating, but what I didn't know was how to set up a proposal, how to position myself. And I went and I did it on my own. So what I said to myself after it, because it, of course, it didn't work out because I wasn't prepared, I didn't have the positioning to be able to offer that at that stage, is that I thought, okay, I'm not good
Mm.
enough. I won't be able to ever do this. I shouldn't want to attempt to go and work with teens. I did that for a while,
Yeah.
but then thanks to this work, I said, is, well, what would partnership look like in that case? So I said, if
Mhm.
I can't do
Mhm.
it on
Mhm.
my own, then who can do it? And how can I bring them in so that they can support me so I can grow into the person that then in the future I can set up a proposal like that and talk to an HR director and and pitch
Mm.
or create the opportunity where I can when I can go and do the work that I want to do. And for me, that is an example of, you might, it's not that you're not good enough in like a big whole range of things, and that it becomes then who
Mhm,
you are. It's what part of that have I yet not mastered? I am I not good enough for yet,
mhm,
and that I can prepare myself, I can learn,
mhm.
or I can partner with others so that I can get to that level.
It's very important how we are setting the expectation, because
Mm.
no one is perfect. Yeah, sometimes we assume that it's me who is not perfect. It's only me who is not perfect, or I'm
Yes.
amongst the people who are not perfect. But the thing is, like, no one is perfect. The moment you acknowledge that, you are present to that very fact, it's going to cool you down. But you need to deeply be present to it. Yeah. So no one is perfect. Now, but that doesn't mean that everyone can add the same amount of value in different games that we want to play. See, the moment that you're going to have any value proposition, yeah, let's say for example we want to play any game. I'll go, guys, let's play basketball right now. Some of us are going to be better than some others. The good news is there are so many different hierarchies. There's not only one hierarchy of competency. This is one of the greatest achievements of the modern world, that there are so many different hierarchies, that if hierarchy of competencies, that if you're not doing well in one, you perhaps will do well in another one. Yeah.
Mm.
Now, so that's one thing. Another one is, see, when you are aiming, when you are setting objectives, so one of the things that sometimes we do is we create this big of a vision. You know, it's massive.
Mm.
And you're going to compare yourself as this amateur, as this person who is like in the beginning of the game or in the middle of the game.
Mm.
We're constantly um, comparing ourselves to this perceived ideal. And obviously, phenomenologically speaking, it's a common human experience that you're going to be drawn to the perceived ideal that you have. And guess what? You're going to be always behind if you keep comparing yourself to the ideal. So here's the simple conversation we can have. You want to keep your perceived ideal. That's okay. That can be motivating in most part, and at parts, in some at some times, it's going to judge you. Yeah,
Mm.
and it's going to keep you on your toes. But if you're going to whenever you're having these momentums, you're taking these small steps towards that ideal. If you're going to let the ideal judge you so harshly that you collapse, that's not healthy. What I would say is we should not let um, the the these small achievements that we're going to have towards that big of a vision that we have make us feel so insignificant. Yeah, at the time, as the time is passing. Or I can put it this way: see, you want to aim low enough so that you can take the leap. You don't want to aim quite high that you're going to break your bones. Yeah. And that
Mm.
happens a lot. Like, for example, when we work with entrepreneurs, that's the case. It's really good to be ambitious. It's really good to have this big of a vision, but at the same time, being in acknowledgement that you want to go towards it bits and, bit by bit. So that's a very important thing. One more thing I would like to bring up is, like, see, sometimes genuinely, um, our self image is far below what we are or how we are right now. Meaning
Yes.
that you may be really good, like you may be really good at singing, let's say, yeah, objectively speaking. You're keeping the notes, you're keeping the rhythm, etc., etc. But for whatever reason, through your self thoughts, because you're overly timid and overly tamed and overly um, whatever, so you're not going to relate to yourself as the person that actually you are. Now, a very good thing is, like, if you see yourself in the eyes of certain supportive people that are not just inauthentically just in giving you affirmation words or the word of encouragement, they're giving you constructive feedback. Yeah, the people that are in that field, they can see where you are at. and if you can trust them, that's going to be extremely useful. Yeah. And we have
Mhm.
that, like for example, if you look into this X Factor, American Got Talent shows and everything, there are times that certain people come to sing and they can't even sing. Like it's like
Yeah.
like they can't keep the notes, they can sing a single note properly, keep on with the rhythm, but they think that they sing so well, that's why they're there. At the same time, it happens though, you see people that they can sing so well, but they are not really confident about that. So I think a big part of that comes to exposure to different people in that field, and also your relationship with confidence.
Yeah, let me just touch on that for a second because one of the biggest things I think around this conversation is, so you've got your self-image. It can be inflated or it can be below what you actually are and how capable you really are.
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
is, well, how do you check? And I think that's one of the key works that we do, is supporting
Hmm.
people to check in with the reality of, well, where are they, at what level are they. So if it is, for example, as a facilitator or as a coach, we support them to check and validate at what level they are. And if they haven't,
Yeah.
because what you find is a lot, also so many people that have this inflated persona, but they have such good
Hmm.
positioning, they have such good marketing, that they portray out there that they're up here, but then other
Yeah.
people might be down here. And it's sort of, well, how do you support them to create a more congruent relationship with the reality
Yeah.
of the capabilities and then what is possible for them. So I always do this
Mhm.
work is sort of, well, how do you know? How can you check? Who can you check with? So that that perception that you have
Yeah.
is as congruent as it can be with how things are. And there's different ways you can
Yeah.
do that, from going and asking for feedback, going onto a show where they'll give you, you'll be able to be advised by experts at what level you are.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's, how can you check?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let me make it even simpler because, like, I think that what you're seeking in this conversation is a more kind of an intellectual answer, but it can be simpler than that. See, I touched on this very important word. I think that we moved past from it quite swiftly. Exposure. See, if you're a
Mm,
kid, when we were kids, we had a little bit more autonomy, I think, in the sense that, in comparison with today's world, that we would go out there and then we would physically engage and play with our peers and everything. Yeah.
yeah.
When you do that, then you're going to, due to that exposure, you're going to learn the limitations of your, let's say, muscles and body and everything. Um, um, and also you're going to compare yourself with others and then see how you're going. Yeah. So physically, at least.
Mm-hmm.
So during this exposure and practice and play, that's another word. Yeah. So we want
Mm-hmm.
to play the games, then you're going to get to know yourself better and better. So it's not a purely intellectual, while it's cognitive, but it's not purely intellectual thing. You just sit there and then you contemplate and compare and analyze. It's not just that. You need to go in the field. Yeah. Now, another good news here is no matter which stage of any hierarchy of competency you're at the moment, there is a market that they would value what you have to offer. So the brilliance of your work would be identifying where you're at in comparison, and then choosing the right people, right target audience that they can resonate with you, your message, and they are at that stage that you can support them. So intrinsically, we know that you can support. This is the nature of being human being. Yeah, you are capable of supporting others, but which exact others?
Yeah.
That you need to study. So see, remember we said that like this, there is, I mean, like our understanding of ourself is constantly evolving. Yeah.
Mm.
So therefore, as you live your life and you try to make sense of yourself more and more and build that self-image, you are in a constant or continuous state of becoming rather than being. Yeah.
Mm.
It's like you're not just a person, you are a community of people distributed across the time. Because see, you before this conversation and after this conversation, you're not going to be exactly the same person. Your conceptions of reality around the self image conversation is not going to be exactly the same. Me too. So,
Yeah.
so therefore, you this understanding of yourself is evolving, and there then another part of it is your understanding of these others that you want to work with also is evolving, and that's why I said that the exposure matters so much. You want to have self awareness, you want to have situational awareness or awareness of others. If you can match these two, yeah, and it takes something, but if you can match these two, whatever you already have to offer, it's valuable to someone, to a
Yes.
market. And that's something that you need to work out. And that's required a kind of an entrepreneurial mindset.
It applies not an entrepreneurial mindset only, because even if you, I have a lot of clients in the corporate world that they're saying no, because if I leave this job, I won't, I don't
Mhm.
have anywhere else to go. But it's, well, there's always a place for your level of skills. It's sort of, well, where is it that there is that market for that level of skills, that experience that you have, where you could be perfectly matched?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people say, if I
Yes.
leave here, I want to go up a different level. So I wonder, they'll
Yeah.
have this vision of where they want to go, and they say,
Mm.
I'm not there yet. Say, but that doesn't mean there isn't a market for you.
Yeah.
And it's the same concept,
Yes.
that
Yes.
you, as if you were an entrepreneur, like finding that client that already needs the level of skill that you have.
And by entrepreneur mindset, I didn't mean everyone to be an entrepreneur.
Okay.
An
Right.
entrepreneurial mindset in a sense that you want to create value. Yeah, you want to articulate what value you can provide, and then this value needs to be effectively communicated to a market out there, and that market could be an organization that you're selling yourself and your qualities to. Yeah. But
Mm.
the idea behind what I said is like you are valuable, but then value is a relative concept. So valuable to whom? Valuable in what sense? Yeah.
So I guess checking in with reality, the expectations that you have, um, the context that you're in, like all of these elements can support you to create that more congruent conception of your
Yes.
self-image, and then what's possible for you. And
Yeah.
it's interesting, because even though this makes total sense, I still find people that will truly, at their core, believe that they need to be perfect, and that they can be perfect. So even
Yeah.
if we do this, in certain aspects of our life, there can still be those like core beliefs that run through us, that we have this standard that we're trying to achieve, and that can come from, maybe from our childhood, or we've created it some at some time along the way, that we create this standard for
Mm.
us that is
Yes.
unachievable, because it's not congruent with how human beings work. Like, we're always stretched, we're
Yes. Yes.
always learning, and if we're not doing that,
Yes.
then uh, like, we're missing out. Is that? And I always say, like, embrace the
Yeah.
discomfort of being stretched, because that's how you continue to grow.
This is the thing, when you talk about self-image, and then you said that a person goes, "I'm not good enough."
Yeah.
So if you're a perfectionist, yeah, if you assume that there are perfect people there, and you are not perfect, and therefore you should not dare to step ahead. I mean, if everyone wanted to think that way, you wouldn't see any product out there,
Yeah.
any service out there, because I think most companies, successful companies, they know that their product is not perfect.
Mm.
The thing is, like, you can make them perfect if you want to. Even if you wanted to just do so much work and make them perfect and then launch the product, it's very likely going to be very late. Yeah. So therefore, what I would say is, yeah, so you have value, you are valuable, but you need to see um, who would value that,
Mm.
and in terms of like reaching out and working, choosing the right target group to work with. That's very, very important, basically.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm most grateful for in terms of the work that I get to do and that you get to do is that we do get an insight into how people perceive themselves. And then no
Hmm.
matter who I've worked with, there's always some level of incongruence between their self image and then what's possible for them and who, like the congruence
Yeah.
with the reality of who they are. So no matter if I've worked with extremely senior coaches or senior executives, there's always this bit of incongruence. So the beauty of this work is that you get to catch it and then you start creating that level of congruence, and then
Yeah.
things that they thought that weren't possible for them, they are. And it also creates that level of um, I think people feel reassured that it happens to all of us,
Mhm.
and that's part of the game that we're in
Yeah.
as human beings, that is to catch those incongruences.
Yeah. Yeah. See, this last thing I would like to say. Um, it's really hard to bring all of this conversation and wrap it up in almost 30 minutes in this episode. But um, so this is quite important. See, when you talk about self-image as part of the authenticity, one's relationship with authenticity. I mean, you can't just look into that in isolation. See, that's why it's extremely important holistically look into all these different qualities that we have in the framework. Yeah. Um, because it's not only your relationship with your self image or authenticity that is going to shape your self image, your relationship with anxiety, fear, vulnerability, your relationship with confidence, your relationship with courage, your relationship with the presence, all of these matter. So it's not like, okay, like I know that the my self image has a little bit of issue, I need to address that,
Yeah.
therefore I only go and then I laser focus on my self image. No, your relationship with awareness, authenticity, with vulnerability, with presence and freedom, all of them matters.
Mm.
So if a person really wants to dive deep and try to make sense of how they are relating to themselves, they actually need to see it. You need to zoom out, and then they need to look into the totality of their being more holistically.
Absolutely. I think in these episodes, we're trying to narrow some of these topics down, but really they're so interconnected to all of the other aspects of being. And I think we don't
Yeah.
mention it explicitly, but awareness is at the forefront of this conversation. It is always there. So
Yeah.
yes,
Yes.
we're making an
Yes.
effort to synthesize and just narrow it down. But absolutely, there is a lot of contributing factors to this.
No. Yeah. 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 So I hope that our audience enjoyed the conversation, and let us know if there's any specific comment or question you have. We can definitely take them into consideration in future episodes that we create with Lucy. Lucy, any final say before
So
we wrap it up?
just thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to the next one.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you, everyone. Bye.